I made changes to my diet, and lo and behold, within a couple of months, my mood got better, my anxiety levels got better. I stopped having panic attacks, and then it was a process. Once that happened, I was like, wow, like there is a connection between what we eat and how we're feeling and functioning mentally. The more I dropped the amount of carbohydrate I was eating, the better I felt and functioned, not only mentally but physically, energy levels, and so forth.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very excited to be talking to Asher Edelman, the owner of Stone and Spear, tallow and personal care products that are healthy and based on beef tallow, no preservatives. We'll talk more about that towards the end. Thank you so much, Asher, for accepting my invite. Can you share a little bit about your backstory with debilitating depression and mental health conditions, and how that, amongst a few other health conditions, allowed you to find the carnivore diet, and how you found healing on the carnivore diet?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Sarah. It's good being on your program. So yeah, I've my background, I've dealt with mental health issues ever since I can remember, ever since childhood. Uh, Mainly mine were based on the circumstances that I was born into and that I grew up in, PTSD related. So I really didn't know anything else other than anxiety and depression growing up all throughout childhood. Um, for me, things got a little bit better with regards to my functioning, my anxiety levels as a teen in high school, and then in college. And then I would say towards my late 20s, my situation declined again, worsened. Um, so yeah, my late 20s and then my 30s and early 40s, I was just a mess. Trying to manage with the depression, with the anxiety. I developed panic attacks. I'm trying to think, probably in my early 30s, which started off slowly, and they happened every once in a blue moon, but then they slowly and progressively got worse and worse, became more severe, became more frequent, until at at the peak, I was experiencing them almost on a daily basis. They would happen at work when I was meeting with clients, or meeting with coworkers and colleagues, or managers. And yeah, I got to the point where I was really not able to function at work, and had to quit a job that I really loved, a very prestigious job that I really enjoyed, but I just wasn't able to function and keep it together. And I had I think at that time I started going to therapy, and I was in therapy, weekly therapy, for about 4 years. My therapist is great, super smart. It was very helpful to understand why I was experiencing the panic attacks, the anxiety, and the depression, but didn't really help stopping or overcoming those issues. So I was still experiencing all the panic attacks and the anxiety and so forth. And my therapist suggested that I go on psych meds and anxiety meds, which I was 100% opposed to. I didn't want any chemicals, brain altering, mind altering chemicals in my body. That was one of the things that kind of made me nervous, made me anxious, and so that got me to kind of go down the rabbit hole and on looking online, reading online, seeing if there's some other way, or something that might help um, bring down my anxiety levels. And I wasn't too optimistic. I was just hoping to kind of um, decrease the frequency and severity of the panic attacks to where I'd be able to hold down a job, support my family. So that was that was my kind of goal.
Mhm.
So in doing a lot of research and reading, I came across a few articles, books, etc., that mention that there's a link between how we fuel and nourish our brain, i.e., what we eat, and how our brain is able to function, both in terms of cognitively and in terms of mental health, psychiatric issues. And being in the very desperate situation that I was in, I said, okay, I mean, it sounds crazy. Like, what is what I'm eating have to do with anxiety and depression and especially since I've had it my whole life and it's rooted in kind of PTSD issues. But I was willing to try anything at the time. So I gave it a shot, and I wasn't on a very highly processed diet back then. I was on a what most people consider a pretty clean Mediterranean diet. And I was still experiencing issues. So I made changes to my diet. And lo and behold, within a couple of months, my mood got better, my anxiety levels got better. I stopped having panic attacks. And then it was a process. Once that happened, I was like, wow, like there is a connection between what we eat and how we're feeling and functioning mentally.
What was the
So
diet that you first implemented and you found this relief in 2 months?
I got rid of eating sugar and eating processed grains. So wheat. Well, I think I was still eating a little bit of rice here and there back then, but I think mainly I got rid of eating anything with gluten in it. So and other processed foods, sauces, things like that, and anything with sugar in it. So I guess it was kind of a paleo style way of eating. And yeah, it really had a huge impact on my mental health. And so that obviously got me even more curious. And so I read more about it and, started reading more about nutrition. And yeah, eventually over the past, gosh, it's been maybe 15 years or so since that happened. So my my way of eating is has evolved during that time. As I've done, I tried different things to see what's worked better, what hasn't worked as well. And so it led me down the path of starting off kind of paleo-ish, and then very clean, and then keto and this was probably like over 5 or 6 years, and then keto, which is basically eating meat, eggs, dairy, things like that with with some vegetables. Um, and again, the more I dropped the amount of carbohydrate I was eating,
Mm.
the better I felt and functioned, not only mentally but physically, energy levels and so forth. and and so I'd say probably about a year or so into being ketogenic on a ketogenic diet, I started hearing about this crazy idea called the carnivore diet, where you only ate meat and no vegetables, no plants, and which sounded totally insane. But finally, my curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to try it. And that was about 6.5 years ago, and and yeah, it's been by far the best way of eating that I've been on so far, which is why I've been doing it for 6.5 years. So that's kind of my progression, the health issues that I dealt with, kind of the progression or my introduction to nutrition, and my progression throughout my nutritional journey. But I also had it wasn't only the mental health issues, I also had a number of physical health issues that started popping up and affecting me. And those also significantly improved or completely went away.
Wow. Okay. How would you describe your current mental health?
Um, I'd I'd say it's pretty optimal. I experience zero feelings of depression, like no anxiety. I certainly haven't had a panic attack in, like I said, it's been like 15 or 16 years, none at all. And, the things that used to trigger or ignite a panic attack or high anxiety levels, it just doesn't happen anymore. Whereas when anyone who's dealt with depression and or anxiety, it's like you're not in control of yourself. You're something kind of takes over, and you're just along for the ride, in a very negative sense. So you can't calm yourself down. You can't improve your mood. But for me, when I made these changes and I started eating right, I didn't have to. Like before, it was always all throughout my life. It was like battle or a struggle to keep my mood up, to keep my anxiety levels down, to calm myself. Okay, let's do yoga or let's do meditation. And yeah, those things do help, but now I don't have to do anything or try. I mean, it's just my brain is just functioning optimally. And so my mood's good 98% of the time. My anxiety levels are non-existent almost all the time. Again, no panic attacks, and which is crazy because back then in the heyday, I thought that okay, this is how it's going to be for me for the rest of my life. I'm, I'm never going to be not experiencing some level of anxiety or mood issues, depression. So I just kind of accepted that that's how I was going to be the rest of my life and figured I'd try and make the best out of it, however, however was possible. But yeah, now it's non-existent. My energy levels, my focus, my concentration are through the roof. Whereas before my whole life, I struggled with fatigue all the time on a daily basis ever since I was a kid. Again, I never thought that would change. I just thought that was my genetics, or so yeah, it's really interesting that a somewhat fairly simple change that you make after therapy hasn't worked, and well, I never tried meds. Like I said, I didn't want to go near those, but doing something so simple as changing your diet has such a profound impact on your brain's functioning, your mood, your physical health. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Wow. How much of a difference did you notice after stopping? Because you did the last stage before carnivore was keto. How much of a difference was there between the jump between keto to carnivore?
Significant. Even though on keto I felt really good, so dietary change that I made, I
Mhm.
felt like, oh wow, like I feel the best I've ever felt before, and I think this is like as good as I can feel, which was good, which is really good, because I didn't expect that, and then the changes that I made from paleo to keto, even better. So oh, wow, like I feel a lot better on keto than I do on paleo, and this is probably the best I'm gonna feel. And and then, like I said, I started hearing about carnivore and tried that, and was very apprehensive about it. And because how can one give up vegetables and nuts and seeds and olive oil and all that good stuff? So and it just sounded very limiting and restricting, and so psychologically it seemed very difficult. But I said, okay, well, I'm gonna try it for 30 days, and even if I don't like it, I can always go back to regular keto. And then I thought, well, what's the big deal? Also, if I don't like it after 2 weeks, like no one has a gun to my head and is forcing me to do this 30 days, so I can even like stop it after 2 weeks, after a week, if I really don't like it. So I started it, and when you make a dietary change, as I'm sure the first few weeks your body's going through an adjustment period, and so you kind of feel off, you feel a little bit fluey, you feel kind of weak and fatigued, and which is natural, and so I expected it, even though it's annoying when you're going through it. But yeah, I'd say the first couple of weeks was like that, and then probably about the third week I felt this like boost of energy and like my strength. So, and working out, I was lifting much heavier weights than I'd lifted before, and I just started feeling better and better. And the interesting thing, going from just regular keto to carnivore, um, like I said, I dealt with chronic fatigue my whole life, and I still had fatigue issues on keto. And again, I thought that's okay. That's just how I feel, and I figured that's how everybody feels. And so I didn't expect that to change at all. And I'd say probably about 2 or 3 months into carnivore, I started waking up before my alarm clock, which never happened. My alarm clock would have to go off, and regardless of how many hours I had slept the night before, I'd hit snooze several times, and just like kind of have to peel myself out of bed and kind of get myself going. And it was always very hard, and it was always very hard to wake up, to get up in the morning. I always felt very tired, like I hadn't slept well, I hadn't slept enough, even if I'd slept 10 hours or 12 hours. And so 2, 3 months into carnivore, I'd start waking up, um, before my alarm, and well, this is weird. And I'd look out, and it still looks like it's dark outside. And I'd look at my clock, and it'd be like 5 o'clock or 4:30. And my first thought would be like, oh, crap. I could have slept another hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. And I'd be like, wait a minute, I feel totally alert and energized. Like I don't feel tired at all. And that happened every day and I'd like every morning I'd be amazed at that happening because I wasn't used to it. 40 some odd years, you experience something, then all of a sudden you experience it, something that's the complete opposite in a good way. And so, yeah, ever since then, like crazy high energy levels every day, all day long. Now, regardless of how little sleep I get, um, I try and prioritize sleep, of course, and sleep's very important. But on the rare occasion where I don't get enough sleep, I don't feel optimal, but I feel pretty good, and I certainly don't feel fatigued and so forth. So that was a really pleasant surprise, and my just ability to focus and concentrate were very heightened. Um, a couple months into carnivore, and also the physical aspects of it, like body composition. So I lift weights, and I just really started to lean out, and without really trying. And I was doing the same workouts that I've always done. And so just changing, my diet had a very significant impact on those areas. And so I said, okay, well, this is going good, and I really don't miss salads or vegetables or whatever too much. So, let me continue it for another month and see how it goes. And yeah, so it's been like 6.5 years so far.
Wow. I love the waking up because that has been my struggle too. And that has been the best part about being carnivore is that even if sometimes I'll get the other day I got 3.5 hours, never, ever would I be a functional human being on 3.5 hours. Not even six. Six is, I'm dying. I can get by on 7.5. But 3.5 hours, and I was just so fine the whole day, no great energy, mood, focus, all that kind of stuff. And I know it's the diet because I track everything, and I've been tracking for years. So I have all the data. So I can go back and see those changes. And it's so powerful, this effect on sleep. Something about Jordan Peterson, that's also one of the reasons that I was very interested in the carnivore diet when he went on Joe Rogan and talked about how it would take him 2 hours sometimes to get out of bed. I'm like, wow, so I've struggled with that too sometimes. Just so difficult to get out of bed and get moving, get the day rolling. Um, outside of all of the other great things, that has happened to him as well from the carnivore diet. But that was something that I always remembered. And yeah, that's been your experience as well,
Yeah.
right? And then the 3 week mark is so common. So many people say the same thing. At like the 3 week, there's something magical about being on a carnivore diet for 3 weeks that something changes and your brain goes into overdrive. Like you really feel the benefits around that time point.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like I said, I knew that there would be an adaptation period.
Mhm.
Even though when it happens, like I said, it's still annoying and frustrating. And you go to the gym to work out, and you feel weaker, and you're kind of tired, and you feel kind of like you're coming down with the flu, but it's not the flu. And yeah, then all of a sudden, around 3 weeks, it's just like you wake up one morning and wow, I feel like way better than I did yesterday. And you go to the gym, you're lifting like a lot heavier weights than you did than you've done previously. And but yeah, it's interesting. And that seems to be most people's experience also. When I work with clients, as a nutritional therapy practitioner, so most of them would have similar experiences. A few weeks of not feeling so hot, going through that adaptation period, and then around week 3 or so, they're like, boom, a new person. And then typically by the end of the first month, so most of the people that I worked with were people with mental health issues. So typically around the first month is when they would notice a significant improvement in their symptoms, and how they're feeling and functioning, and it would just get better and better till around a month and a half, 2 months. They were like a new person, and this is like people with all different types of mental health issues, for all different reasons, all ages, from little kids to adults to seniors, and it's crazy. It all followed kind of a very similar trajectory. But yeah, very, very huge positive impact on these people's psychiatric functioning, mental health functioning, and just from changing their diet.
Amazing. Yep, yep. And the studies are really starting to pile up on this, and it's so exciting. Yesterday, I believe, or a couple of days ago, Dr. Sean Baker shared this paper that just came out on how a carnivore diet cured this woman's severe, debilitating OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, but really severe to the point where she would have thoughts of harming her family, like repetitive thoughts of harming her family or her baby. So she couldn't work. She had to isolate to protect her loved ones. She chose to go to a university far away from her family members so that she wouldn't run the risk of harming her family. I mean, extreme. 1 year on a carnivore diet, completely cured, without, off the drugs, everything. Then something happens. Like, I'm trying to remember why she was convinced. Somebody convinced her. Some doctor is like, just add in some sweet potatoes for some reason. I can't remember why. Maybe she got pregnant or something. And 4 months later, she starts having those thoughts again. Then the doctor is like, okay, well, then let's cut that portion of the sweet potato in half. Then in a quarter, still having symptoms. Then she stops it. I think after she stops the sweet potatoes, then it takes 4 months for the OCD symptoms to completely go away again. And since then, she's like, okay, that's it. she's stuck to carnivore. I feel like sometimes we have to play around with the boundaries to see, okay, well, maybe if I add in something else, I'll be fine. But oftentimes I find that people find their best self just on strict carnivore.
Yeah, and some people need to learn the hard way, and with my clients as well, and most of my clients, and like with me, I've never cheated, and I just don't feel the need to or the desire to, and I don't want to like take a chance at like you mentioned that that woman, having all the symptoms and issues come back. Like I don't want to, I don't want to play with that and have, no food's worth something like that possibly happening.
Right. Because you might get a panic attack, right? Because now you've lost a little bit of the tolerance to, let's say, gluten or some of those foods. So now your body kind of forgot the tolerance. You go back and you have a cheat. The symptoms that you had might come back with a vengeance until you build
They
tolerance
probably
to
will,
them
yeah.
again.
Because yeah, your tolerance is almost non-existent, non-existent, and I've seen it happen multiple times. I mean, there's this one kid, like he's I think a 20-year-old college student, and he had schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia. He was hearing voices. People were out to get him. The government, this and that. He had to drop out of college and check himself into a psych hospital for several months. They put him on meds. He didn't want to be on meds. His parents didn't want him to be on meds. So they came in, and I met with him and got him on a carnivore diet. And again, within about 3 or 4 weeks, like all the symptoms, the voices were gone. Wow. The paranoid, delusional thoughts were gone. The anxiety was gone, and he was doing really good. I think around 3 months, he came in. I think it was on a Monday, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm hearing the voices again, and I'm feeling really anxious again." I said, "Okay, well, what happened?" And we went over like if there were any changes to his diet, and he said, "Oh yeah, so it was his mom's birthday, I think on the Saturday, and they went out to eat, and he had like a bite or two of her birthday cake." Wow. And his schizophrenia symptoms came back, and so I told him, okay, just you'll be okay. Just go back to eating, eating like strict, and over a few days, I think you're going to be feeling a lot better. And that's what happened. So like I've noticed clients who will have a cheat meal, or whether inadvertently or because they wanted to try something. So as long as I get back on the wagon, usually it's a few days for, I guess, the brain to clean itself out of whatever they'd eaten. And so yeah, later that week or the following week, he was back to where he was before, functioning, not hearing any voices, not having any paranoid delusions, paranoid thoughts. So yeah, it's really powerful stuff, and I've seen it like in almost, in so many different types of scenarios where, it's not like, oh, it's not like the placebo effect. And because you just see it's a, well, so whether it's young children, 5, 6-year-old kids in kindergarten who are out of control, emotionally, physically, behaviorally, getting in trouble all the time, and not, but like these are good kids. Like I remember this one client at a very elite, prestigious private school, very expensive private school. So the kid was going there, very professional, educated parents, good family, but this kid was just out of control and just misbehaving and lashing out at other students, at the teacher, throwing things in class, getting into fights, breaking down, losing his stuff and just crying. And yeah, it was on a daily basis. His mom was getting called by the principal to come pick the kid up because this or that outburst. And also inability to focus, really bad ADHD also in addition to the behavioral issues. And the mom couldn't get him to do any assignments or any homework, regardless of how much she tried to bribe him or convince him or whatnot. And again, he wasn't on a crazy like McDonald's and candy diet. His parents were, like I said, very educated and well off, so that they bought good food. And so yeah, about 3-4 weeks into carnivore, he's like a star student. The mom's not getting any more phone calls from the principal. The teachers are asking, what'd you put him on? Did you put him on, Ritalin or Adderall or whatever? And she's like, no, didn't do anything, just change his diet. And he wasn't acting out. He wasn't misbehaving. He wasn't breaking out and, crying. He wasn't, he was able to focus and do his homework after school, do his schoolwork while he was at school. And so just a total 180-degree turnaround just because of how he was eating. So back in the day, it's like 10, 15 years ago, or maybe when we grew up, that kid would be labeled a bad kid, a problematic kid, a troublemaker. And when you're a young kid and that's how you're being labeled and you grew up with that, that's what you're going to believe. Oh yeah, that's who I am. I'm a troublemaker, I'm a bad kid. And it's just going to get worse and worse. And, in high school, you're going to do some stupid stuff and get thrown in juvie. And then, and so there are a lot of kids, and I don't think there's any such thing as a bad kid. Like all kids are good, even the ones that misbehave and go crazy and get in trouble. They're just, their brains are just malnourished and inflamed, and they can't control their emotions or their behavior or any of that. It's not their fault. So it's amazing. You see things that, and a 5-year-old kid, he can't fake anything. He's not faking these outbursts at school and getting into trouble and tearing up his schoolwork and his books. And so for a kid to go through a 180-degree change, and where the parents are blown away, the teachers blown away, like nobody can believe it. So it's pretty amazing. That being said, it's pretty unfortunate that these stories are kind of being kept hush hush by the mental health industry. And so many other people and kids could benefit from this very, very simple change or intervention. Doesn't cost anything. It's not very hard to do once you get used to it. But it's not at all profitable, and a lot of people would be losing a lot of money if this were to become very well known and very accepted and very commonplace. So that's kind of unfortunate, but it's really cool being able to help people and work with people and see how they change also, and the improvements that they make. And you like really good, and people would tell me, oh my gosh, you're a saint, you're this. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like I just did something, found out what worked, and and I'm sharing my experience with you, and like it worked for me, so of course it's going to work for you. And but it's not anything special really. But yeah, people are just blown away, like as I was, because I really didn't expect it. But it's amazing how much of an impact your diet has on your health and functioning.
Just incredible and so inspiring. I was wondering if a 5-year-old had challenges following a carnivore diet. Do you have any advice for anybody listening to this? Because I know these kinds of things are on the rise, especially with children, and the parents feel like they're paralyzed. It's like, well, I send them to school, even though if I give them food at home, and then when I send them to school, it's a problem because the food environment is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the main challenge with young kids. With high schoolers, they already know, and they're aware, and once they buy into it, and also once they experience the positive changes, and they're good with it. But for primary school, elementary school kids, that's a challenge because they get sent to the cafeteria during snack or during lunch, and a lot of kids will like exchange, hey, let's trade this for this, and
That
so
used to be me. I would exchange
yeah,
everything for Nutella, Nutella
exactly.
subs.
Right. So that's the thing I tell the parents, like you have to tell, the teacher, the principal, everyone that they have to watch your child during break, during recess, during lunch to make sure they're not eating anyone else's food because that'll have a huge negative impact on their functioning. That's the big challenge is getting to where a teacher or a staff member will like watch over them and make sure they're not swapping foods with another kid, or their
Mhm.
kid gives them one of their Doritos or whatever. Like that's the big challenge because obviously the parent controls what they're eating at home, but it's a little trickier when they're at school.
Exactly, exactly. So in that particular case, do you have any, do you know how the implementation went?
Yeah, they would just have like a staff member watch over the kid and make sure that nobody's exchanging foods with the kid or giving the
So they
kid
did it.
their
Wow.
food. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, sometimes it takes, a while. And in this case, like I said, it was a private school. So, private school administrators, teachers, so forth, are going to be more receptive to
Mm,
requests from parents. Other clients, it's usually had kids in public schools. So that's a little bit more of a challenge, but the parent just has to be on it. It has to be insistent and persistent. And this is their child's mental health, and which is at stake. And it seems, kind of silly or strange, like, you know, uh, to have to monitor or watch what their kids eating during lunch break. But that's it. Like it's, if you want your kid to get better and to feel better, and to function better, like you have to do
yeah,
that or have that done in some way, and
exactly.
ensure that that's being done in
Yeah,
some way. Because yeah, even if it's once a week, the
yeah,
kid has a bite of whatever once a week, they're not going to get better because, like I
yeah,
said, it takes several days for the body and the brain to clean itself out from the whatever crap they ate. And so if they're having one cheat meal or one cheat whatever bite once a week, they're not going to get better. It's
yeah,
just going to be like a cycle. And yeah, so that's the one main thing is for young kids with ADHD or with autism or with anxiety or with whatever issue. You have to be very diligent and careful, and it's hard at school, to
yeah,
ensure that the kid's not eating
yeah.
anything else.
The worst case scenario, homeschooling could be an option for some people. And also, just a reminder that this could be the difference between a child who will forever have problems because they're not laying down a correct foundation, could end up in trouble, incarcerated, delinquency, all that kind of stuff, versus having a completely different path in life, going to an Ivy League school, or becoming a successful entrepreneur, whatever that's how wildly different the paths could take if the foundation isn't really, you're not really paying attention to their foundation. They're not absorbing the information, and all of a sudden they think, oh well, I'm just not smart, I can't retain information. It's like, no, it's just your brain is on fire, it's inflamed because you're allergic or you have sensitivities to the craziness of the current food environment.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering when you started the carnivore diet, what was your diet like, and has it changed then versus now?
Yeah, so it started off, and probably like most people start carnivore, so you're the main thing that you're trying to struggle with or trying to get used to is the lack of variety in types of foods you're eating. So in the beginning, I would eat all different kinds of meats, seafood, pork, beef, chicken, eggs. I would eat dairy, like all kinds of stuff, and really like change it around a lot, or eat like a bunch of different types of meat for every meal. And then as time went on, so I tried to increase the amount of fat that I was eating because I'd heard and knew that fat is very important. Um, and for brain and mental functioning, for hormonal functioning, for functioning of a lot of different organ systems. And it's hard though getting used to eating high amounts of fat when you've been on a sort of a low fat diet your whole life. So it does take your digestive system some time to adjust. That took probably 3 or 4 months for me to be able to eat substantial or significant amounts of fat with my meal. And so that whole process, which I slowly would try to increase the amount of fat that I was consuming. But if I ate a little bit too much fat, I would feel nauseous and bloated um, and would have diarrhea. And so I just kept slowly pushing, increasing, slowly and gradually. And I'd say probably after about 4 months, I was able to eat, a good amount of fat with my with each meal and feel good and not feel the GI issues. And then after that, it was smooth sailing. And so it got to the point where I guess my trajectory, and I think it happens to a good amount of other carnivores, is you kind of narrow like the foods that you're eating kind of narrows. And my thoughts on that is that as your body gets used to carnivore, your body gravitates and craves the most nutrient rich, nutrient dense foods. And so you just don't like, I don't really feel like chicken. I don't really feel like, fish. And because those are less fatty, less nutrient rich. And so what you crave are the fatty red meats, tallow, additional fat. Um, so so I, at some point, again, I was, doing little self experiments, even when I'm carnivore, to see what worked better and what didn't work as well. So I ended up dropping dairy after about a year or two. I quit coffee after about a year or so. I didn't really eat chicken. I don't really eat chicken or fish. I do have salmon sashimi every once in a while. I can't eat salmon cooked though because it's just too dry and just. But raw sashimi I can do, and
Smoked salmon. I love smoked salmon.
smoked salmon I can have every once in a while. I prefer sashimi over smoked salmon, but smoked salmon's good. But I'd say 98% of the time I'm eating. There's ground beef that I get from a local rancher here, grass fed, grass finished. It's amazing. And so I've also tended to, so it's mostly beef that I eat now and tallow and like fat trimming pieces. And I'll have bacon also. I've gotten into that sort of recently. There was a number of years where I didn't have any pork or bacon, but now I'll eat that. So it's basically, and the ground beef that I eat is more or less raw. I like sear the both sides of it for maybe like 20, 30 seconds, basically to warm it up because
Yeah.
it's better. Like I like it better when it's warm, when the meat's warm, the raw meat when it's warm. But raw is like the best. And like what's interesting, I can't really even eat a cooked like burger, like ground beef. To eat it cooked is just so dry and just so like off-putting. Like I don't know, something about it being raw. But I wasn't like that for a number of years. I had like food had to be cooked, even though a steak would be like rare or medium rare. But occasionally I eat steaks. Occasionally I eat some other stuff. I eat oysters on occasion. Most of the stuff I eat now is raw, though, except for bacon. So whether it's raw ground beef or raw sashimi or raw oysters. So that's basically what I have. So it's gotten very narrow, like what I eat each meal. I eat twice a day, so breakfast and dinner. And my breakfast and dinners are 99% exactly the same. And I eat that every day, the same thing, breakfast and dinner, and I don't get sick of it. And like what's usually a bummer if there's like a birthday or a whatever like going on with friends, like oh crap, I gotta go out and like eat a restaurant steak now, and like I just want my raw ground beef and my tallow, and so that's interesting that's been the trajectory for me at least. Is that it's gotten very very narrow, and where I only crave like the same foods, which I'm sure looks completely crazy to anyone on the outside looking in. Like, how's he eat the same thing day in, day out, like every day and not get sick of it? But I don't.
Yeah, because you feel so amazing. How can you get sick of feeling amazing, right?
Yeah, and like if what's crazy is that if you look at any animal, whether it's an herbivore or a carnivore, they eat the same one or two things every day of their lives and never get sick of it, never need variety. So why should humans be any different? And when we're eating real optimal human food, like that's the case with us also, is that we want to eat that same optimal human food because, like you said, we feel best when we're eating that same optimal human food, and we don't need variety. So, but when you're not eating optimally, then yeah, you want to eat different things, and you get sick of eating something, and I think that's also there's a physiological reason for that because your body is craving and requesting nutrient rich foods. Your body's telling you eat something optimally. I wasn't optimally fueled and nourished from that last meal, so eat something different in the hopes that we'll eat something that's optimally nourishing. But most people don't do that. They eat, an equally nutrient poor meal, and so their body's constantly craving variety or something different. In my opinion, in the hopes that it'll be nourishing enough and providing the body and the brain with all the nutrients, macro and micro that it needs. But most people don't do that. When you do that though, your body will request and crave the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Um, Especially coming from, traditional academia, brainwashed as a classically trained dietitian, all the salads and oh my gosh, it gives me
Eat the
PTSD.
rainbow.
What?
Eat the rainbow.
Oh, yes. At first it was like 5 a day, now it's 10 a day, and everybody's guts is being destroyed. Um, it gives me PTSD just to remember, and just all the time wasted thinking about food, what to do about food, how much food to eat, when to eat, is it time again to eat? And then like the food addiction aspect, it's so exhausting and it
Mm.
really ruins your quality of life. Uh,
It's a
yeah.
lot more pleasurable and easy just to when it comes time, it's evening or it's morning, you throw the same piece of meat on in your pot for 20-30 seconds and you're good to go, and yeah, you don't have to think about anything, or it's
Yeah.
or quantities. You eat until you feel satiated, you eat when you're hungry, eat until you feel satiated, and that's it.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting how we've all been raised and conditioned, and where it's so far off from how we should be eating.
So true.
Yeah.
Have anybody around you been inspired to follow suit?
Yeah. There's been a few family members and friends that have gone down, that have made dietary changes. I don't know if anyone's gone full blown carnivore. I think I've had some people I know try it and also experience a huge difference, but some have fallen off the wagon.
Mm.
And that's the thing. If you're not experiencing debilitating, painful health issues, you're going to be a lot less motivated to be so restrictive. So if you try carnivore, do it for a few months, even if you feel really good, and you're craving a dessert one day or craving a whatever, and you have that piece of cake, and it doesn't totally wreck you and like put you in throw you into a loop in terms of pain and suffering, you're like, oh yeah, that's not a big deal. And so it's easier to fall off the wagon. Whereas
Yeah.
if you've had serious health issues, that's a big motivator, and that's why 6.5 years I haven't not once cheated or eaten anything that isn't meat, and nor do I have any desire to, because I don't want to play around with it.
Yeah, that's exactly the client that I was seeing right before we jumped on the interview. That's exactly what we were talking about. And she was telling me, yeah, it's like almost that it's harder for somebody who doesn't have this terrible, terrible thing that they're trying to heal with carnivore. It's almost harder um, for her to stick to it because it's like, but I can have a little bit of that and not be bedbound, let's say, for a month. So
Mm.
in a way, it's like the silver lining of somebody who's really going through severe struggles right now with their health or mental health. It's like it's going to be easier for them to completely transform their lives and their mental health and their physical health because they don't have to deploy as much uh, discipline or this chatters like, is it okay to just do carnivore? Can I allow this? Can I allow that? Like, you don't have to do any of that. It's just like, you know what? This has been so horrible in my life. I'm not even going to entertain cheating. I'm just going to do it. And then, their life transforms.
Kind of a blessing in disguise.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, not to, anybody can do it. Obviously, we're working on the mindset and the motivation because there are different ways to motivate yourself. You don't have to wait until your end stage to change, because then imagine how much time you would have to wait until this terrible thing happens. Why change at 70 when you can change when you're 25? Wouldn't that be great, right?
Or why wait until you're completely miserable and suffering to change?
Exactly.
I would think it's better to nip it in the bud and start doing the right thing before you start experiencing painful, debilitating symptoms.
Exactly. You said beef trimmings. Do you mean like just pieces of fat and then you just you saute them? Do you cook it? Like how do you have that?
Yeah, so I'll go to like butchers, and so when they're cutting different steaks, and so they'll cut off a lot of the fat, and those are called the fat trimmings. And usually they'll throw them away, or they'll make tallow with them. And so you can usually find a place that'll sell it to you or give it to you for free. Um, and so I'll take those, and yeah, I'll like cut them into small pieces and throw them in my cast iron pot, throw it in the oven for several hours, and then the liquid tallow renders out of the fat trimmings, out of the fat pieces, and then the fat pieces kind of condense and get smaller. And then after a while, so like halfway after I have some tallow in the pot, like I'll scoop it out and put it in a glass dish, and then put the fat trimmings back in. So you make sure that everything is getting rendered out, and then the fat pieces will kind of turn like golden brown, and they'll get kind of crispy. And yeah, and then I keep those and I eat them together
Those
with
are delicious.
with the ground beef, and yeah, it's so good, so delicious. And so I'll have like a thing raw ground beef with like sitting in it looks kind of like soup, but the broth is just rendered liquid tallow, hot tallow. And then I'll have the fat pieces also, so I really eat a lot. I mean, probably 80% of my calories are from fat, and 20% are probably from protein. And I know a lot of people, there's like a trend on that's going around social media now. Ooh, like prioritize protein and get your protein in, and lower your fat intake. But that's not gonna, like, I wouldn't be able to do carnivore for a month if I had to eat low fat carnivore and like high protein. Like I can't. I won't feel satiated. I don't feel good and calm and balanced and everything after I eat. I get hungry 2 or 3 hours after I eat if I don't eat a large amount of fat. Whereas if I eat a good amount of fat, I stay satiated for 10 to 12 hours. Uh, so yeah, it's one of the things about carnivore, it's very important to eat a lot of fat and prioritize it and not worry about it making you fat. And I'm even in my 50s, like I'm in very good shape, body comp wise, and I don't do any cardio or anything. I just lift weights, compound exercises mostly, so squats, deadlifts, bench press, things like that. And I'm in very good shape. I have people asking me like at pools and stuff if I'm in UFC, if I'm MMA fighter, if I'm a gymnast or whatever. And and that's eating so much fat. So fat does not make you fat. It does not put on body fat. Like I've never been in this lean in my whole life, and I by far exponentially eat way more fat than I ever used to. So fat's super important for mental health. Also, our brain needs a lot of fat and cholesterol. Yeah, I think people shouldn't worry about that. And even like I said, it is a process to get your GI system used to digesting and absorbing and utilizing high amounts of fat, because our GI system does get out of shape from not eating optimally for decades and decades. And it is a process to get just like it's a process to get your body, your muscles into shape if you haven't lifted weights or exercised for decades. If you haven't eaten right in decades, your digestive system's out of shape and weak also. You need to strengthen it and get into shape. And it does take several months, just as it takes several months to get your muscles into good shape.
Very well said. And it's going to help so many people stick the course because people freak out. Start having diarrhea the first couple of weeks. It's like, oh, this is, everybody was right. I'm going to die on this diet. And it's just not true. You really have to have a healthy perspective on and just adjust your expectations. You've been eating all kinds of foods for some people 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. It's not going to happen in 2 days or even a month. Sometimes it can take a few months. Actually, I feel like that's the norm. And sometimes even a year or two to really feel the full effects. And I don't think the full effects completely stop happening. I think you keep getting better the longer you are on this diet, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
I wanted to ask you about constipation or diarrhea nowadays.
Mm.
Do you suffer from any of that?
Never experienced constipation. And I think part of the reason why is because I like tried to eat a lot of fat
Mm.
and diarrhea again in the beginning. In the first few weeks, it happened a lot. And then as I tried to slowly increase my fat intake, it also would happen. But yeah, I mean, if I do, and that's the thing is, once you're eating right, and like now it's your body knows what to do. So if you eat too much fat, which happens to me on very rare occasions, but it does happen, then your body just gets rid of the excess, through diarrhea.
Mm.
And then okay, yeah, I probably ate a little too much fat, like my body didn't need it. But very rarely. It's going to the bathroom is a breeze, and I suffered from GI issues my whole life ever since childhood.
Mm.
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
by far the easiest thing you can do for your digestive system as well, especially if you've had GI issues, if you've
Yeah.
experienced GI issues in the past. It really just balances and stabilizes, and your poops are smaller because you're not eating insoluble fiber and other things your body can't digest. So there's less waste. Your body's because you're eating very nutrient-rich foods, your body's utilizing most of what you're eating, and so there's very little waste byproduct left that you need to excrete, that your body needs to excrete. But yeah, you're normal. I go every day, like clockwork, and never any issues, and it's that's a really nice thing also.
Yeah, and I love you mentioned the gut issues because the gut is the second brain, and it almost always happens at the same time when you have mental health conditions. It almost always correlates with either a candida overgrowth or a SIBO or something's happening in the gut. Can you share a little bit about your gut symptoms and how long did it take for them to go away on carnivore?
Yeah, I mean, so ever since childhood, I had, I would get like really bad, like cramp kind of attacks in my intestines, like really bad pain, and I would have diarrhea a lot. And I remember sometimes I would, I would be in high school, I'd be driving with friends, going out on the weekend, and one of my friends would be driving, and I'd tell him, "Oh, pull over, like we got to go to a gas station or fast food, I got to go to the bathroom," and just like explosive diarrhea. And I had that for years and years and years. Bad bloating, bad cramps, bad gas, bad diarrhea. And again, I just thought it was my genes. Like I just got bad genes, bad GI issues. And so yeah, that totally, like all of it went away. The bloating, the everything, the gas, the everything went away. And now I can eat a huge meal of just meat and fat, and afterwards my stomach's is flat as it always is, which is like very flat. So yeah, it's amazing. I'm trying to remember how long. I probably should have done a journal when I first started, because it's been a number of years. So I don't exactly remember, but I mean, yeah, they definitely got better. And as even though the bloating I think got better pretty quickly on. The gassiness I think got better pretty quickly. Pretty quickly. The diarrhea I think took a little bit longer, a number of months. I think like around 4 months or so, because I was trying to increase my fat intake, and so I was kind of like pushing the limits. And my body would just get rid of the excess because it didn't know how to digest the higher amounts of fat that I was eating. But yeah, certainly all the GI issues would stabilized and gone away, probably after like 5 or 6 months of being on carnivore.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
If you had SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is so common, most people have it, especially if they've been eating like normal foods, um, especially if it is hydrogen dominant, because there are different types of bacteria that can overgrow. If you have SIBO that's hydrogen dominant, the main symptom would be a lot of diarrhea and all of the other digestive symptoms, versus SIBO that is methane dominant, the main symptom would be more towards constipation. And so it could be that, and that's very typical, right? Around 4 months, you could have starved all of those bacteria, the overgrowth, and also that could have been why the diarrhea stopped, because the SIBO went away. You just healed your gut. That's my
Yeah.
hypothesis.
Yeah, it's very likely. Yeah, I never got tested for anything, so it's hard to know exactly, but yeah, it sounds like that, is very possibly the
Yeah.
case.
It's only recently that people have been publishing about SIBO and talking about it, and conventional medicine still doesn't touch it. I have a client, oh my gosh. He's got terrible, terrible gut issues, like cramps, all that kind of stuff, bloating, debilitating anxiety on medication for very long time. And the heartburn has gotten so, 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 so bad lately, to the point where he can't sleep anymore. It's like completely ruined his life. He's in his late 60s. So the doctors, instead of looking at, hey, what have you been eating? Because I'm telling him, you've got SIBO. I'm pretty sure. Like, just a carnivore. It'll go away. Trust me. Um, the doctors obviously are completely clueless, and now he won't listen. So he's gonna do the fundoplication surgery, where you tighten
Mm,
the lower esophageal sphincter. And I'm like, listen, when you're burping and you're releasing gas, that's your body trying to relieve you from the intense pain that could happen if you don't have an outlet. That's a good thing. I know it
right.
feels really uncomfortable now, but your body's actually helping you by releasing all the excess gases from the bacterial overgrowth. What's going to happen now that he's going to get and tighten the lower esophageal sphincter? I don't think he fully comprehends the pain and the cramping. People who don't have established SIBO diagnoses, they do the surgery for the reflux, for the heartburn, the fundoplication surgery, and they develop SIBO. They get worse. It's like a known side effect, worse bloating, worse gas. So it's very frustrating to kind of drill that into somebody who's not fully aware of the gravity of the situation and what they're heading into. And it's like I feel like helpless, really.
Right. And
Yeah,
it's even more challenging when you're telling your client one thing which flies in the face of what
yeah,
their physician
yeah,
is telling them.
yeah.
And yeah, it's a challenge, and you have to be persistent and persuasive, and it's hard. And if you're, fortunately, so when I was working with clients, I'm a pretty stubborn guy, and my dad was a lawyer, so I learned how to be pretty convincing and persuasive and to argue. And so, yeah, just for me, fortunately, I was able to convince enough of my potential clients to give nutritional therapy a shot, and it really made a difference for them. But it's hard because, well, my doctor said that this, and the like, you told me to do this and this. My doctor said that it's going to do this and this and this to me, and it's bad, and cholesterol and whatever. And you're like, oh gosh.
Right.
But
There's
yeah,
also
it's definitely a
something about,
challenge.
say that again. Oh yeah, yeah. There's also something about taking the easy way out. Deep, deep, deep down, he knows. People know.
Right.
And they're still trying to take the easy way out, right? Because it's so shocking to them to have to do strict carnivore. It's such a
Yeah.
shock to their system that they're like, no, I'm gonna follow what the institutions are saying.
Right. I'd rather go under the knife than give up my Twinkies and whatever else I'm eating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Okay. What about cholesterol and your doctors and the cholesterol aspect of it?
I mean, I think it's all BS what the doctors are trying to blame high LDL levels for, cardiovascular disease risk. And it's, what I've seen through my blood work and through the blood work of many other people is, if you're metabolically healthy, you're going to have high HDL, low triglycerides. And you might have high LDL, you might have normal LDL. LDL, I think, doesn't matter. If you're, I think if your triglycerides are low, your HDL is high, um, then most likely you're going to be, your other metabolic health markers are going to be good as well, which are, glucose levels, A1C, blood pressure, et cetera. Um, and then you're metabolically healthy. You're not going to be at risk for cardiovascular disease. So it's a lot of, I don't think what most of us are being told by our physicians is correct. It certainly hasn't been helping because they've been telling patients that for decades now, lower LDL and take statins, and that hasn't helped. Just the rate of heart attacks and heart disease keeps increasing and increasing, even though more and more people are following the doctor's low cholesterol advice. So, logically, that's not correct advice. Otherwise, there'd hardly be any more heart disease. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge when people hear one thing from their doctor and you're trying to tell them, the opposite thing, and who are they supposed to believe? And so that's why you kind of have to be like I said, persistent and convincing, and because you know that you're going to be able to help them, and so you kind of have to be convincing, and convince them to at least give it a shot for for a few weeks or for a month, and but
Yeah.
that is definitely a challenge though.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, especially if the other person just doesn't want to go through that, like it has to come from deep inside. This is why, again, it goes back to when you have something really, really terrible, it makes it easier to just do the carnivore because you cannot just imagine going through that again. And I do want to, I know I don't want it to be super long, so, but I do still have like two quick questions if you would
Sure.
answer them. Um, at the height of the depression and the anxiety and all that kind of stuff, how bad was it? Like, can you share a little bit of like the extent of it? What, or some story that can kind of shed light on just how bad it was?
It's pretty bad. So that was the only time where I was able to understand why people become suicidal. So you're just in so much pain and suffering all the time that is completely out of your control, that you have no control over, where you're just like, I don't care what it is. I just want this pain and suffering to stop. I don't care how. So, that's when I can understand how people get to the point where they want to kill themselves, or they try, or they do kill themselves. So it's bad. I mean, fortunately for me, I had a few young kids at the time, and so that was so I'm like, oh, okay, I can understand it. I'm not going to do it though, because I think it'll be, I think you know a crazy non-functioning dad is better than a dead dad, especially that killed himself. And so I'm going to suck it up and just power through it, and because I don't want to do that to my kids. So fortunately, that was my situation back then. But yeah, it was definitely really bad, and like I said, and that's why it was easy for me to make dietary changes and to try that route. I was willing to do anything except for go on psych meds. So because I was experiencing such a high degree of suffering and pain, and that I could only alleviate after I had several drinks, which I did that many times, self-medicated with alcohol, pretty frequently, over a few decades. Um, so yeah, it gets bad, but again, on the flip side, that's what keeps you strict. And so once you're feeling better, you don't, or I don't at least, feel the need or the desire, or am tempted to cheat. But I think also, a caveat to my story is that, even though I was in a really bad place, and I'd been suffering for a very, very long time, and was really not functioning at all, couldn't hold down a job for a number of years, and I was able to completely 100% get rid of my symptoms. Um, and it's been like that for, a good 15 years now. So, and, like I said, mine, mine was rooted in, my childhood situation, PTSD related, which shouldn't have anything to do with, with nutrition or whatnot. It's, that I went through this trauma as a child. And so that's, I should have had to work through my trauma and da da da. But it turns out, that didn't help. The going to therapy and doing that, the trauma work and so forth didn't help relieve my symptoms. What helped was doing like something completely different, which was changing the way I feel and nourish my brain, and that made all the difference. And then those things, those negative thoughts, those obsessive negative thoughts, just didn't happen anymore. My brain wasn't fixating on negative things like it had always done all throughout my life. And so your brain is just relaxed and calm and functions well. And like things don't trigger it and things don't set it off and things don't get it down the wrong path. And again, that's without me trying to control or do anything. It's just my brain's natural state. It's just how it functions naturally. Like I don't have to try and stay calm. I don't have to be in a good mood. That's just how my brain is now that I'm feeding it right.
Wow. I so relate to everything you just said with the whole trying to regulate your mood versus it being great without you having to do all this work just to function like a normal human being. I get that.
Yeah.
The alcohol part actually was my second question, and you did mention it a little bit. How does that tie into your experience with carnivore?
So yeah, prior to carnivore, I mean, alcohol was great at relieving anxiety and depression for 3 or 4 hours while you're under the influence. Not so great in the next day or in the long run. So kind of a band-aid on your symptoms, which I imagine that's what psych meds are, also a band-aid on the symptoms. You're that, or they just zonk you out and you're just like a zombie with like no feelings, no emotions at all. But and I'd always, I mean, I was a pretty heavy drinker ever since my teens, ever since high school. And after going carnivore, and I would always like, if I was in a social situation with friends at a bar or a restaurant or wherever, like there's no way and people were having a cocktail, there's no way I wouldn't have a cocktail also or a drink also. And so I'd say, again, I don't know exactly how long, maybe like a year into carnivore, my appetite or desire for alcohol just really dropped, and to where I was, in different social situations, at a party or whatever. And nah, I'm just gonna have a Pellegrino, just kind of some sparkling water, and like I just wouldn't feel like drinking. And I think it's because like I had felt good all the time so much where I didn't want to like screw, because I knew I was going to feel off the next day and feel out of it. And I just, I was used to feeling, really good all the time. Whereas before, when I felt like crap all the time, like, okay, I don't care if I'm, hungover the next day and feel a little crappier than how I usually feel, not a big deal. But yeah, so that's been the case. And I've heard from other carnivores that it's the same thing. It like kills your appetite for alcohol. And what I've heard also and seen a little bit is, and I think my hypothesis is that carnivore would be and can be a great intervention for drug addiction also, because I think it would have the same mechanism. Alcohol is basically a drug, right? So I think it would have a similar effect or impact on people who are addicted to other types of substances. Um, so, but yeah, it is very interesting to also you being and feeling a certain way your whole life. Whereas for me, it was like, oh yeah, alcohol, let's party, let's have a good time. And then to a year into carnivore, like, I'm not really feeling it. I was like, what? Like, I sure wouldn't be feeling like having a drink or two or three. And so yeah, it's interesting the change that you go through with regards to alcohol.
I love that so much. Yeah. There's a study showing this as well, that, and I think it has to do with the gut health. I think it just it really heals the gut, and when you heal the gut, the brain functions the way it's supposed to, right? Your gut is your second brain, and so if you have any kind of infection or candida, which is so common, or SIBO, again, so common, and so many, or some infection that your immune system can't really overcome because your body is so dilapidated and trying to just constantly inflame. So once you heal the gut, the brain heals. And if the brain healed, it's not looking for an external source of dopamine or serotonin or endorphin. It can make its own. And so, yeah, addictions naturally, you don't have to fight the addiction as much anymore. And sometimes it's just seamless.
Yeah, yeah, you just lose your appetite for it.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Asher, thank you so much. Share with us a little bit your Stone and Spears. You changed the name, right? Because we started with a different name and now it's Stone and
Yeah,
Spears. Yeah, can you share a little bit
yeah,
about everything that you're doing? I'm so excited for it.
yeah. So that started. So a few years into my carnivore journey, I started to get interested in kind of changing my skincare routine. Soaps, deodorant, that type of thing, and swapping out the commercial soaps and skincare products, which are each include several dozen crazy chemical ingredients that I don't even know what they are, for more natural ingredients. And the thought being, your skin is porous. What you put on your skin gets absorbed in your body. So if I'm like trying to control and limit what I consume, what I eat, to real optimal unprocessed foods, to optimize my health and functioning, like I want to do the same for what I put on my skin. And so I had heard about tallow soap, and I tried it and ordered it from a farm out in the Midwest somewhere, and loved it. It was great, very moisturizing, very hydrating. Um, so so I had been using tallow soap for a while, and at the same time, my freezer started getting more and more filled up with tallow from that I had from cooking my food. And I couldn't, I eat tallow, but I couldn't get through it enough, and so that it just kept building and building. So I thought, maybe let me see about, if I can learn how to make tallow soap, and I'll have my own soap. And then I made some. It was great, but then instead of having a lot of tallow, I had a lot of tallow soap, and like, well, I can't use all this tallow soap. Maybe like I'll put up a website and see if there are some other crazy carnivores that might want to buy some tallow soap, and so get rid of some of the inventory on the those at my place. So I did that, and yeah, and that went well, and people started buying it, and really liked it, as I did as well. And then they started asking for different types of products, so moisturizers, body butters, lip balms, et cetera, et cetera. And so I started working on developing additional products, most of which are tallow based. And yeah, so now we have about I think almost close to 60 different products, that go from skincare, hair care, um, cosmetics, makeup. So yeah, it's been going well. Be fortunately, thankfully, and also because they're natural, with natural, like, nourishing ingredients, they work really well, and your skin, your hair, etc., feels really good and gets really healthy when we like stop using these synthetic, artificial products, and go back to using natural products with natural, healing, nourishing ingredients. So yeah, that's what I've been doing the past several years, and it's going well, and aligns kind of very well with my thinking with regards to optimizing health and well-being, and nutrition, and this is kind of a way of nutrition, nourishing our bodies kind of through our skin.
Fantastic. I have some of your products, and I'm excited to get the liquid tallow ones. I think that the liquid tallow is great, as like we were talking about the guest bathroom, and the makeup stuff as well. All of the non-toxic uh, beef tallow based lipsticks. that's something that I'm very excited to try out as well. I'm going to make sure that I post the link to your website in the description box below, but can you share the website in case people want to check it out real quick?
Yeah, it's stoneandspeartallow.com.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think it's something like 30% of what we put on our skin gets absorbed, and so it's a big deal. What we're putting, the lotions we're using, the makeup we're using. So it's if you can change that, imagine how much better you're gonna feel. Your skin is gonna look, everything. So really grateful that we have people like you doing this amazing work and bringing these products, much needed products, into this world. So thank you, Asher. I'm so inspired, and I'm sure you're going to help so many people with your story. So many people that have been struggling all their lives, being, just thrown around from doctor to doctor, from prescription to a higher dosage, and all the side effects, which, by the way, affect gut health. A lot of these antidepressants actually wreck your gut health, which is usually the root cause of why you're suffering from depression or anxiety. So, or PTSD or schizophrenia.
Pretty ironic, right?
Yep, yep. This is what happens when nobody bothers to ask the question, why? How come?
Exactly why.
Why? Is it
What's
that
what's the
difficult to ask?
cause? Right. Yeah. Nobody asked that.
No, it
Yeah.
just blows my mind. Asher, again, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for sticking with us till the end. Please share this content because YouTube does not share this type of content very easily if it's not something that's short and falls within the mainstream narrative. They really don't push out this type of content. So if you know somebody, and I know you do, who is suffering, make sure you share this information with them and help us share this message. And also make sure you give this YouTube video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.